The last Republican presidential nominee to carry Arlington, Virginia, was Ronald Reagan in the 1980 election, when Arlington County was in Frank Wolf's 10th congressional district. And even then, in Stanford Paris's 8th congressional district in Alexandria, Democrats were defeating Republicans 3-1 in the city in which the first and last Republican mayor won by only 87 votes in the city's quietest election back in 1872. A victory achieved in a coalition with the newly emancipated slaves, and taken away when Jim Crow was enacted. And for the past 2 decades, Arlington has decided the outcome of every statewide election, including the governorship, the race for the Senate, in which Mark Warner won his first victory by only 1 percentage point in votes over Ed Gillespie, and the presidency, in which President Trump lost Virginia by only a small margin of 5 points. For any candidate seeking the nomination of the Republican Party in the 58th most reliable congressional district in the nation, and the top gaining Democrat district in 2016, this is what an officer candidate on Fort Benning would call required knowledge, especially since the incumbent distinguished himself with the all-time record highest percentage for an incumbent in Virginia's 8th congressional district during the midterms, defeating a candidate just old enough to run for Congress in his first try at politics. Suffice it to say, this is a difficult congressional race that cannot be won by a novice, and the president requires a strong anchorman and a fighter ready to fight tonight in this congressional district to flip Virginia red and reverse a tide that has already threatened abortion and infanticide, gun rights, secure borders, religious freedom, and so many other essentials in our American way of life. When a novice looks at battle and war in a movie or in a news feed, he or she might easily come to the conclusion of General William Tecumseh Sherman that war is hell, or agree with the doctrine of General Colin Powell that to achieve victory what is required is overwhelming firepower. These are not difficult conclusions to draw, and may well be sufficient understanding for an armchair general or a Monday morning quarterback who has never played a game. But every young officer who attends the U.S. Army Intelligence School at Fort Huachuca, Arizona, is taught to dispel those misconceptions that war is a free-for-all, where armies proceed to battle without any well-developed plan to achieve victory, fully recognizing the hazards of their chosen profession, and understanding, as did Sun Tzu, that the battle is won before it is ever fought. And beyond a great light show filled with sound and fury, a trained military intelligence officer is equipped with the required knowledge regarding intelligence preparation of the battlefield and the knowledge of the order of battle dictated by military science that transforms the hell of war for an unseasoned soldier into the ordered chaos for a warrior ready to fight tonight. Hope is not a plan in battle, nor in a political campaign, regardless of whatever you believe you will do if you win. To proceed in battle following your dreams is placing the horse before the cart, and even former New Jersey Governor Tom Keene recognized that to go to the moon and do all of the other things, all hope is lost if you cannot get your Apollo spacecraft off the launch pad. And any military operation is preceded by hours of detailed planning, training, rehearsals, readiness, sustainment to be able to fight tonight, and extensive logistical coordination to advance to a point in a phased operation to meet opposing forces on a field of battle where fortune always favors the bold. And in 2020, no other leader has come forward with the required conception of a successful military commander in the field to articulate a vision for victory, define success in quantifiable terms, and state in language a 5-year-old could understand as to how to get there, until now. And Major Mike Webb has not only crossed the Rubicon, but is making plans to blow the bridge and clean the swamp. Perhaps you saw the George C. Scott movie about General Patton, and recall that he liked to visit the battlefield before an engagement and review the battles of other commanders who had fought on that terrain before him. And equipped with the knowledge of past successes and past failures, he could easily address an auditorium of soldiers to state with confidence and authority that we would not be holding any ground but advancing, not to die for our country, but to make the other poor bastard die for his, and go through Germany like shit through a goose. And taking a mental journey across this battleground state of Virginia, the failures of past nominees in Virginia's 8th Congressional District to achieve victory informs the reasonable mind not only that a candidate in his first try at politics cannot win, but also the recognition that this is a freedom front movement, essentially. Much like the one faced by the Kurds, who drew the heartstrings of persons like Tim Kaine before the last elections, the early colonial army, about whom some poked fun during the last celebration of our independence from the tyrannical rule of the British Crown, or even like the one faced by military leaders of the seceded states of the Confederacy, seasoned warriors who sustained for 5 years an incredible effort against all odds in a war that should have been over on the first day the armies met in Manassas, just a day's march from the nation's capital. And in every one of these military engagements, commanders in the field advanced operations to convince allies to join their resistance fight by convincing them that success was possible and an achievable goal. But in the conventional warfare of a political campaign, that quantifiable measure is determined in the metric of dollars and cents, investment in the return. And to a mathematical certainty, no prior nominee with a statistically significant loss by this financial indicator, nor who has failed yet to learn this shortcoming, will ever convince national leaders of conservative causes to join this fight, as even the recent history of the 2010 and 2012 races graphically illustrate, where a competitive candidate who had met the threshold of $250,000 in receipts in his first try was punished in his succeeding race for failing to put points on the board with over $400,000 in his war chest in his quest to unseat Jim Moran, who had gained control of the district in 1990. It is often said that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and the long line of failures in the history of prior nominees in this district validates this intelligence analysis. Anyone who has gone to a polling place is fully aware that progressive forces will deploy in mass with buddy teams during the voting period to get out the vote in absentee voting and at the voting precincts on election day, most oftentimes paid by special interests like George Soros and Planned Parenthood. And those who hope to continue to make America great and support the president cannot again wake up surprised, having fallen victim to empty promises that hundreds of college volunteers will assure success in November. If the incumbent Don Beyer cannot get 1,000 moms against guns in a Black Baptist church in Gum Springs, no math teacher talking about his dreams for education will place 1,000 people in a church for a town hall, especially not in the congressional district with the least faith in America of record, where no church has 1,000 congregants in worship on Sunday morning, in Virginia, where only 45% of persons have faith at all. Nor can anyone who hopes to achieve any success rely on national polling. since 2018 that supports the conclusion that persons of color are supporting the president record numbers. It did nothing to prevent an all-time record loss for a new candidate during the midterms, and even progressive socialists expressed outrage regarding the failures of African Americans and Latino voters to come out in support of Hillary Clinton after Barack Obama had claimed his legacy achievement of aiding an avowed enemy and an existential threat to our best friend and strongest ally in the contentious Middle East to gain a nuclear strike capability. Even the laws of Newtonian physics dictate that a reaction is always precipitated by decisive action, and an object at rest remains at rest unless acted upon by unbalanced force. And it is an exercise in futility to assume that any candidate, no matter how capable, will ever launch a challenge the size of a jumbo jet aircraft from the shortened runway of an aircraft carrier in June and expect anything but a catastrophe. And for this reason, there is only one candidate who has been engaged in skirmishes against entrenched forces in the stronghold that determines the outcome in the battleground state of Virginia for over 2 years. Major Mike Webb does not have to campaign about how he will fight for federal workers if he is elected, because since May 2018 he has been fighting in the federal courts to preserve their appeals of right in adverse personnel actions, a cause in which even the Federal Workers Union has abandoned them. Major Mike Webb does not have to campaign about how he will fight to improve education, because since 2017 as a candidate for Arlington Public School Board, he has been engaged in the fight at board meetings, through correspondence and in the courts, challenging discrimination, presenting proposals to address the achievement gap, fighting against the progressive agenda and on transgender policy, and championing for school choice. Any military leader knows that the first objective in battle is to force the opposing forces to deploy their reserve. And Major Mike Webb has forced Tim Kaine to deploy the force and might of Perkins Coie LLP, the best political law practice in the nation. He has forced 2 presiding circuit court judges and Attorney General Mark Herring to unprecedentedly enter an appearance on appeal at the Fourth Circuit, and he has compelled 1 presiding circuit court judge to submit to service of process by the United States Marshal. He has been instrumental in convincing appointed and elected Democrats to depart the field of battle in retirement to let him advance. He has brought actions in federal courts against the incumbent, including a civil action bringing 8 counts of violations of the RICO Act, for which he could well face decades in federal imprisonment. And just yesterday, more evidence of political corruption culminated in a formal complaint to the Federal Elections Commission for his illegal acceptance of donations from the super PAC for the Federal Employees Workers Union. Not once, but twice in 2 successive reporting periods. And every other candidate vying for the nomination of the Republican Party was just as silent as they were about allegations regarding the incumbents using $500,000 to secure an appointment to a prominent post in a United States embassy in Switzerland and Liechtenstein. And so in November, it is a referendum election where you have the power to choose between the party of manumission, slavery, oppression, Jim Crow, and subjugation, or to choose the party of emancipation. In November, you have the power to choose between the party of welfare entitlement and government dependency, or the party of opportunity. In November, you have the power to choose between the party of underperforming public schools and achievement gaps, or the party of school choice. you have the power to choose between the party of mandatory union membership or the party of a right to work. You have the power to choose between the party of universal socialized medicine or the party that will let you choose your provider and your doctor and your insurance plan. In November, you have the power to choose between the party of awaiting the arrival of law enforcement or the party of the right to stand your ground and defend yourself. In November, you have the power to choose between the party of higher taxes and growing bureaucracies or the power of lower taxes and self-determination. It is your party and it is your choice. I am a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican, in that order. And I am not ashamed of the gospel. My name is Major Mike Webb, and I am running for U.S. Congress, not unmindful of the future, with liberty and excellence. Let's make America great again. Honest. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb. With liberty, honor, and excellence, by God, we shall make America great again. Honest.